friends, let's start with Class 10 Science Chapter 7 Control and Coordination. So before starting, let me ask you a question. What controls all the activities of our day-to-day life such as walking, writing, sleeping, crying, laughing, eating, etc. etc. So in this chapter, we shall learn the answers to all these questions. First, let us understand the definition of control and coordination. So the meaning of the word control is systematic regulation of our day-to-day activities. And the meaning of coordination is the orderly execution of all the activities in perfect harmony. So in this chapter, we shall learn the control and coordination in human as well as in plants. So the control and coordination in humans is controlled by two systems. The first is nervous system, which is responsible for nervous control, and the second is endocrine system, which is responsible for chemical control. In this video, we shall learn about the nervous system. So the human nervous system has two parts, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system consists of our brain and the spinal cord, and it receives information from the various parts of the body and integrates it. The peripheral nervous system consists of all the nerves present in our body. It is a network of nerves spread all over our body. Now there are two types of peripheral nervous system: the voluntary system and the autonomous nervous system. So the voluntary nervous system is in our control, but the autonomous system is involuntary, which means it works on its own. We cannot control it. Now, before learning more about the nervous system, first let us learn about the structural and functional unit of nervous system, which is the neuron or the nerve cell. First, let us learn the structure of neuron. So a neuron consists of a central cell body known as cyton, many short processes or short fibers arising from the cyton known as dendrites, a long process or fiber arising from the cyton known as axon, and the ending of axons is known as axon terminal or nerve ending. So basically the dendrites are the short processes, the short fibers, and the axon is the long fiber. And dendrites are many in number while there is only a single axon. Now, very interesting fact about the neuron is that the two neurons do not join to one another completely. There is a small gap present between two neurons, and this gap is known as a synapse. So the gap between two neurons is known as synapse. Now the next important question is that how does a neuron transmit a message? So how do impulses travel inside the neurons? So let us understand this with the help of the example that you have touched a hot object and how this impulse will travel to the brain, and then it will come back from the brain to the muscle, and the brain will order the muscle to move your hand back so that your hand doesn't get burnt. So information from the environment is detected by receptors present on the tips of dendrites. Now the tips of dendrites of the neurons, they have some specialized receptors and they detect the information. So the information about the hot object is detected by the receptors present on the tips of dendrites. Now this information acquired at the ends of the dendrite tips sets off a chemical reaction that creates an electrical impulse. This impulse travels from the dendrite to the cell body, to the axon, and then finally to the axon terminal. At the axon terminal, the electrical impulse sets off the release of some chemicals. These chemicals cross the synapse or gap between the two neurons and reach the second neuron. They start a similar electrical impulse in the dendrite of the next neuron. Similarly, the impulse travels from the neurons to the muscle cells or the glands. The place where the axons of motor nerves meet the muscle is known as neuromuscular junction. So first, the information is detected by the receptors of dendrites, and then it is converted into chemical. These chemicals then set off an electrical impulse. This electrical impulse travels from the dendrite to the cell body, to the axon terminal. From the axon terminal, certain chemicals are released. These chemicals then start off they cross the synapse and they start a similar chemical reaction in the dendrite of the next neuron. And from there again, the electrical impulse is formed, and this process continues to repeat till it reaches till the brain. And similarly, from the brain, it moves till the muscle and it orders the muscle to move the hand back. So we are saved from burning our hand. Now let us study the types of neurons. So there are 3 types of neurons: sensory neurons, motor neurons, and relay neurons. First, sensory neurons. So they transmit impulses from the sense organs to the central nervous system. Second, motor neurons. They transmit impulses from the central nervous system to the muscles. Third, relay neurons. They occur in the central nervous system and serve as links between the other neurons. Now let us study the central nervous system. First, brain. So brain is the main coordinating center of the body. Brain allows us to think and perform various activities based on our thinking. Now this thinking involves very complex mechanisms and neural connections. Thus, the brain has many different parts. Now let us study about the various parts of brain. So the brain is divided into 3 major parts: the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain. The forebrain or the cerebrum is the main thinking part of the brain. Separate areas of the forebrain are specialized for hearing, smell, sight, etc. Also, the forebrain has separate areas where the sensory information is interpreted. Based on this information, the brain decides how to respond. This information is then passed to the motor areas of the brain that control the movement of the muscles. Second, midbrain. So midbrain controls reflex movements for sight and hearing. This controls the involuntary actions such as the change in size of the eye pupil. Third, hindbrain. So the hindbrain is divided into 3 parts: pons, medulla, and cerebellum. The pons helps to regulate respiration. Medulla controls involuntary actions such as blood pressure, salivation, vomiting, heartbeat, etc. And cerebellum helps to maintain the balance and posture of the body. It enables us to make precise and accurate movements, such as walking in a straight line, riding a bicycle, picking up a pencil, writing, etc. The second major organ of the central nervous system is spinal cord. So the spinal cord is a cylindrical rod-like structure. It is responsible for all the reflex actions which we make. It is made up of nerves which conduct impulses to and from the brain. So now the brain and spinal cord are very delicate organs. So now let us see how are these organs protected. So the brain sits inside a bony box known as cranium, and inside the cranium the brain is contained in a fluid filled space which provides further shock absorption. So the brain has 2 layers of protection. The first is the bony box known as cranium, and the second is the fluid filled space inside the cranium which helps in shock absorption. Second, spinal cord. So spinal cord is protected by the vertebral column or backbone. Now the second type of nervous system is the peripheral nervous system. So the peripheral nervous system consists of all the nerves spread all over our body. After the brain makes any decision, it has to send the message to various muscles or organs of the body to perform the action. These messages are transmitted by the nerves. So the function of the peripheral nervous system is to transmit the messages to and from the brain. Now there are 2 types of nerves: the spinal nerves and the cranial nerves. So as the name suggests, the spinal nerves arise from the spinal cord, and the cranial nerves, they arise from the brain. Now let me ask you a question. What happens when you touch a very hot object? You immediately withdraw your hand back. Similarly, when we see very tasty food like this, then immediately our mouth starts watering and saliva starts getting produced in our mouth. So in all these actions, in all these examples, we are doing something without thinking. So the brain is not involved in all these actions. Such actions are known as reflex actions. So the reflex action is a sudden action in response to something in the environment. So now let us see how is control and coordination achieved in such situations. So let's understand this with the help of the example of touching a hot object. So when you touch a hot object, then if you think consciously, then the impulse will generate and travel from the sensory organ to the brain and then come back from the brain to the muscle and make it move. But this is a very long process and it may result in getting our hand burnt. But the solution to this problem is that nerves that detect heat, they are directly connected to the nerves that cause movement of muscles. Such a connection is known as reflex arc. And these reflex arcs are formed in the spinal cord itself instead of the brain. So this is all for today. In the second video, we shall discuss the endocrine system. Thank you.